Hi, I'm Kelli Zaremba. I am Vice President of the River North Design District, and I will be hosting a panel today. I actually am wearing two hats because I work for Slater and lead business development, but also will be representing River North Design District. And I am thrilled to be a part of this collaboration with the Luxury Bed Collection and Katherine Lampert. Mary Pat, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mary Pat Wallace. I'm the founder of the Luxury Bed Collection. We started in 2005 and going strong post-COVID.
Yes.
My name is Imburgia, and I'm an interior designer with Slater, and I worked with Kelli on developing this vignette here with the Luxury Bed Collection.
I'm Katherine Lampert, and I'm an artist, and I created a unique piece for the vignette at the Luxury Bed Collection.
All right, awesome. So we're just going to get right into this and have a conversation about the art, about the process of creating the vignette, and what it's like to have these vignettes year after year pop up in your showroom, right, Pat? Katherine, I'd love to start with you. The name of your piece is Ocean Relic. Can you tell us a little bit behind the inspiration of Ocean Relic?
Yes, so Ocean Relic is part of a body of work that was inspired by a baculite fossil, which is a 65 million year old fossilized sea creature that went extinct along with the dinosaurs. And it was a predecessor to the modern octopus. And this fossil intrigued me because the contour lines on the pattern on the fossil were formed by this creature adding sections of shell as it grew quickly to protect itself from predators, which is a beautiful pattern that attracted me visually, but also made me think about the fragility and physicality of life.
So I have to ask you really quick, how did you interact with this 65 million year old fossil?
So I discovered the fossil in the archive collections at the Chicago Academy of Sciences, which is part of the Milford Nature Museum.
Cool. So was this piece created specifically for Gallery Walk, or did you kind of already have it?
Yes, it was created specifically for the Gallery Walk, and I felt it was important to create a piece for this specific project. When I work on a piece for a specific purpose like this, it's really important to take into account the architecture and the materials in the space so that the piece can sort of live harmoniously with those other elements.
So Lauren, you were involved in the brainstorming behind this vignette. So you met with Katherine, talked a little bit about this piece that she's creating, and then what is the process like for creating a vignette like this?
I think we really started by listening to what Catherine's process was and what she was inspired by, and we then were in turn very inspired by nature and trying to build that bridge between the natural world and the built environment. And we wanted to sort of create a vignette that sort of felt like you were taken from your bed at night when you're trying to calm down from all the world and all of the things happening, and putting that into sort of like a secret garden, a forest where you can just really relax and calm and just really have a great night's sleep.
So I have a little insight just because I was privy to a lot of the conversations. And Katherine, part of your process is like this building up and destruction, right?
Right.
In that conversation, Lauren, was there something that kind of fed the idea of this secret garden in terms of inspiration, like the whole theme?
The layering, we layered a lot of the greenery on top, but I think you had mentioned actually in one of our first conversations that you were going and rereading like fairy tales and children's books and whatnot for inspiration. So we really sort of also hung onto that tidbit to create this magical, mystical feeling that I think is very restorative for us. And I think that was just really what jump-started this idea of a bedroom inside of a forest.
Like this healing element.
Right. Nature always heals. So
Yeah.
it tied very well into the luxury bed collection as well. So it all came together very nicely.
So I'm going a little bit off script just because we talked about natural elements, and I was wondering how that might relate to some of the products that are in the showroom. You know, when we think of beds, I suppose we're not really thinking about natural elements.
Historically in the United States, you're correct, because typically in the US, mattresses have been made of foam, latex, different types of petrochemical products. And probably in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, there's been a heightened awareness about, in all built materials too, right, is low to no VOCs in paint, and how do we finish floors with the least amount of chemicals. Like our homes, we're looking to go more chemical free, and even the products that we use to clean them to reduce that chemical connection to us, as we see the environment continues to struggle with what we humans have done to it. So I think it was a great tie-in, because today, or in the last 15 years, because of products that were really created in Europe over 100 years ago, before foam and latex were created, they used natural materials to manufacture mattresses. And when you think of a place you spend a third of your life, you want to spend it in a place that is chemical free. So it was a natural tie-in, because that has been our mission since we opened in 2005, is to focus on products that are chemical free.
So I kind of want to dig into that a little bit, because I think it relates to Lauren and to Katherine in terms of like your process and the materials you use and like the way you design a space. Natural materials. Is that part of this process as you're building these layers to create a piece of work, Katherine?
So the way I begin my process is by studying an object from nature. And in this case, the baculite fossil, but I have worked on projects inspired by a Colombian orchid and a beetle with interesting markings on its back, all sorts of different sources of pattern in nature. And I create a photographic study of the pattern in nature and often digitally manipulate the pattern to create a repeat as one might if they were designing a textile. And then I collage the printed out photo print onto an abstract underpainting. And then the final aspect of my process is, once that is dry, I sort of partially destroy the digital top layer, revealing the underpainting beneath. So the source of inspiration is always a pattern from nature.
So when you're doing this base layer and sort of like, it's almost like you're building the work. Do you think about natural materials with the paints? Like how does that process work before the digital layer gets placed on top?
So I'm often working on canvas. Natural materials, paper is a natural material. Pigments are a natural material. Sometimes I even sprinkle in minerals to add a little bit of texture. So crushed minerals, like I've used crushed mother of pearl, and
that's so cool.
I have some pieces that have crushed amethyst and other precious minerals, and it just gives it almost like a little bit of natural sparkle, and a sort of kind of a sandpaper texture when you sand with a power sander on paper with these sort of textured crushed minerals beneath. It creates a really interesting kind of dappled texture. So I do incorporate natural materials.
I think that's so cool, because it's like, watching your process, it's like there's this like kind of messy inner process, and then you see this slick finish, and then it gets messy again, and
right.
Very cool. So Lauren, when we're talking about incorporation of natural materials and elements, does that translate to how you're designing spaces at Kahler Slater, or is that just like a vignette approach?
No, it's absolutely part of every aspect of design. at Kahler Slater, we really think a lot about nature and the views on having access to public areas with natural elements. It's part of all our healthcare, hospitality, corporate, higher ed, residential, all of the above. So we really definitely try to make that a priority in all of our projects and in every process of our phases as well.
I think people are way more in tune right now after lockdown and quarantine than ever before, like how important that is for their emotional health and physical health. Mm-hmm. Smart. So, I mean, you can see that there's a lot of layers that go into this vignette. Mary Pat, do you have rules?
That's a great question. So, when it comes to art and design, it's someone's vision, right? So technically, there should be no rules.
Okay, I like it.
Right? There should be no rules. Now, a space can create obstacles or give you a definition of how much you have to work with, or a ceiling, or if you need electrical. But when it comes to when we've done these vignettes for the River North Design District, or when we've done Dreaming of Design, we want the designers and the artists to come at it with no rules, because I think that's when they're the most free. Like, they don't have a client, so they don't have to do this for someone else and satisfy them. They get to satisfy their own interior vision. Mm-hmm. And so Henry and Robert and Jamie, we're all here to help them make that. So as you experienced with the team here, they're like, do you need help hanging, installing? Like, what can we do? Because we want to get to where you want to be.
And that was an incredible experience. I had to tell you, working with your team was amazing. They were always here to help, always on board with everything. So we really appreciate that.
Well, and I think what people maybe don't realize behind the scenes is that there are so many conversations leading up to the installation. I mean, even in coordinating like the size of the piece, like the thought process behind like how large this piece actually is and how it kind of fits into the environment. Mary Pat, it's time to dish. You have to dish the dirt a little bit. What's the craziest thing that someone's ever asked you to do for Gallery Walk?
So no one's ever asked for anything crazy, honestly.
Okay.
Like, there's never been.
Is it us? Is it us?
No. I have to say, we did. We have a sleep room in the back of the store, and during one Dreaming of Design, a designer here in the city, Mitchell Channon, was creating a space that was for like a bachelor gentleman who was like a global globetrotter, right? Like, lived all over the world. And they did this silk canopy on the ceiling, which everybody, if you've ever watched a canopy be installed, especially like I've got a standard like grid ceiling back here, we were all on pins and needles, like, how is this going to get executed? But it became like a little, like, you wanted to crawl in there and not leave.
Like a den.
Yes, like, it was just so incredibly gorgeous, but everything was covered, including the ceiling, and it was like spectacular. And we weren't sure how it was, you don't know going into it. We're like, we're going to give it that, whoever we have to hire to get in here, we're going to make this thing work. And it was fabulous. So,
well, I give you a lot of credit for giving, the artists and the designers so much creative license to actually make it real. Because I think that makes the vignette so successful at the end of the day. So, Katherine, back to Ocean Relic. When you were creating the piece, was there a certain emotion? And I guess even further, like, when you're creating a piece of work, are you ever thinking about an emotion that you want someone to feel, or are you putting yourself into the piece? How is that process for you?
So nature can be a lot of things, right? It can be unpredictable, it can be perilous, and it can also be healing. And that's the aspect of my relationship to nature that I'm choosing to focus on right now with this work. I feel like, particularly in the last 18 months, but probably longer, we've all been under so much stress between the pandemic and so much conflict in the world. I feel like a relationship with nature can be a salve, and it has been to me. So I feel like also, particularly in an urban environment, right now it is so important to bring the outdoors into our interiors, and that sort of healing aspect of bringing the outdoors in and bringing nature into my work is an important kind of emotional aspect of it for me.
Cool. So Lauren, with the vignette, is there a similar process in terms of emotion? Like, is there intent behind a feeling, or walk me through that?
I think we started with a concept in the beginning where we really wanted the person and the end user who would experience this vignette on Gallery Walk to be able to put themselves into the position of, okay, where can I go? Where would I be most restored? And so we sort of thought about that, and that was our concept where, as I mentioned before, it was a feeling of being in this forest where everything is calm and you can just sit and listen, and just moments of repose and relaxation. That was really what we were going for, to just hit that idea home that after a crazy day and all of the things that we experience and have been experiencing for the last 18 or so months, just an area where you can just sit and be and not have to worry about anything else.
So Mary Pat, it's been installed for about a week, a little more than a week. What has the reaction been of people that come into the showroom or that you run into on the street?
Fantastic. You know, they love the colors, the layering, the art. It takes, again, it becomes the outside in. And so you have to do these things and share these things with the public, because they wouldn't think of it, right? Like the average person doesn't go there. They might like have a plant or two in their room, but they don't really
fully commit.
Right, they don't, right? And so I think because they don't know the execution and what it's going to look like. So people have been super excited, and they've come in and asked about like the art and the bed and like the plants and the green wall. So I think it's great because it sparks conversation.
I think that's really fun. Has anyone ordered a complete plant art bedroom yet?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay, stay tuned. So Mary Pat, this is your 6th gallery walk, but you also have the Dreaming of Design event, which you do every year. Why do you believe in doing this? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think that it's really interesting that as a showroom that shows amazing beds, that you're so invested in design. Can you just share a little bit about that?
The bottom line is art and design changes lives. So we are all so blessed to be in an industry where we're exposed to this all the time. Like all of our friends are creative. The spaces it doesn't make a difference if you have a budget for CB2 or if you have a budget for Holly Hunt. People in our industry, space makes them happy. Space can be healing. Space, we're very aware. The average person who's not in our industry, sadly, they might know if they feel better in a space or not. They don't know the why, and they're not as connected. So by doing this, by having things in the window, by having events, we're helping the basic consumer who gets a little afraid maybe of our industry, like, oh, it's going to cost too much, or I can't hire this person. And I always say to people, it's the best investment you can make, especially when you look at the last 18 months, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're home more now than we ever have been. You should walk in and it should bring you total joy. And if it's not, make the investment, because you go and you do that, and then you get to love it for the next 10 to 20 years. Like, people think they're going to change their design all the time. They really don't. Like, once they get their home fabulous and it serves them, it's done. Like, you might like add things from travel or personal things as the years go on, but I just say to people, your home should be your haven. So that's why we do it, because people walk by and they're like, wow.
It tells a story.
It tells a story. And then they want to incorporate that. So
I think that is really powerful. And I guess I really hadn't thought about the fact that it gives a very unique touch point. Just in terms of like the imagination component, but also to connect them to an artist like Katherine that maybe they wouldn't have found just on their own, right? So like to connect that personal connection is really cool.
And we say that, but like people say to me, well, how do I know what to buy when it comes to art? And I had, because my first and only boss, who is probably one of the biggest art collectors in the city, Holly Hunt, you know, I'll never forget asking her, like, how did you know what to buy? And in the early days, she said, you know what? I bought what I loved. Until you get to that point where you're making like major investments, if you get connected to a piece and you see it and you keep going back, that means it's bringing you joy.
Yes.
So that should be in your home. And it's not about what you're going to get in 10 or 20 years.
Right.
It's about what you get from it every day. So to your point, like, they may not have seen Katherine's work till they saw it in the window, but then they see it and they're like, I want to look at that every day. Like, it makes me happy.
Yeah, I think that's really, really cool. Katherine, as you were creating this piece, we talked a little bit about like the emotions that you put into, or that the emotions that you think that it might exude or evoke to someone who's viewing it. This is a little more personal. Are there emotions that you have that are connected to this piece?
Yes, so part of the emotional content of the piece ties to the physical process. It's a little bit like watercolor painting, which is a good analogy because in watercolor, if you've ever tried it, a lot of people say when they first start that it's tricky because watercolor kind of has a mind of its own. And this sort of unique process that I've created also has a mind of its own. When I am engaged in the partial destruction of the digital photo layer, a lot of unexpected things can happen. Some of those unexpected moments are serendipitous, and I'm surprised and satisfied with them, and other times it can be frustrating. Oh, this huge chunk of photo just ripped off, and now I have to figure out how I'm going to make it work. And in a way, it's kind of a meditation to sort of sit with those feelings of discomfort with the unexpected things that can happen.
You know, in conversation with you, just kind of about your process and about the work, I found that so enlightening and interesting to think about, like, you as the artist having to let go of certain things as you're creating this. Like when you equated it to watercolors, I feel like that really does tell the story. So when that happens, do you find yourself liking or disliking a particular piece because of an emotion it makes you feel, or what is that process like for you?
Both. Like any artist, there are pieces that I like a lot more and pieces that are kind of, nagging at me. And sometimes I can resolve them, and other times I paint over them. But it's definitely a process of kind of not just fixing the things that I don't like about it, because that's not always possible, but just almost embracing that kind of relinquishment of control, and embracing that there are going to be passages that continue to draw me in and ask me to do something to them to change them or make them better. Even after something is quote unquote complete or installed, sometimes there's a passage where, I wonder, this piece actually, I had tried turning it upside down, and after I had already signed it on the back a particular way and written an arrow pointing to the top, I decided that I actually liked it equally as well upside down. So that was one thing that sort of came up for me with this work, and I often turn my work upside down when I'm working to see if I like it a bit better or equally as well in different orientations. So that's something that occurred in this particular process with this piece.
I really appreciate that. As someone who's sort of newer to understanding and collecting art, the personal connection to you as the creator of this honestly like really draws me in. So that goes back to what you're talking about, Mary Pat, with introducing somebody to the artist and the piece, like just really kind of understanding the story of how it's made. It just adds another layer, which I think is really beautiful. So speaking of unexpected feelings or surprises, Lauren, was there anything during the process that was an unexpected part of creating this vignette?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
We experienced some supply chain issues with trying to procure furniture pieces to include in our vignette. So that was a little bit of a curveball that I don't think we really anticipated, but we were able to work with Leslie Bowman at the Design Bar, who was very amazing to work with, and she let us borrow things right off of the showroom floor to help build our vignette and make it a reality. So that was a little bit of a challenge that we got through, though. It was some heart palpitations along the way, but
Yeah.
we made it all work.
And in terms of building the layers of green, I know some layers have kind of been removed
Mm-hmm.
from the actual event, just because maybe that was not sustainable for the long term of the installation.
Yeah.
How did you navigate getting all the layers of green in?
We worked with Kinkade, and they let us, and again, very grateful for them, they let us borrow a lot of the plants, and we just that was another challenge. We just wanted more and more and more green to really hit home this idea of repose and rest. So we just kept bringing them in, and every time we thought that we had enough, we needed more. And so we worked with them, and we brought in what we could, and we made the green wall and tucked in some natural elements and tried to mix the faux and the real, but really giving, that element of secrecy and gotta mention the fog machine.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's not forget the fog machine. Very important.
Yes, very important to that whole vibe.
And to that end, we talked about the multi-sensorial kind of experience. So obviously there's the green, and now we have the fog.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other things that were part of the auditory, and what other senses were engaged?
We had a really great playlist that was pulled together that sort of by Patrick Sanzone that sort of gave you the cycles of sleep, if you will. You had your lulls, and then you had your highs, and that was really great for our sound that we added in. And then for scent, we also included a forest floor scent that we utilized that a lot of people really enjoyed.
So Mary Pat, how do all of these elements, I think we're going to dig in a little bit on biophilia and how that impacts design and art, but is there an impact to sleep? Is this something that you talk about with clients?
Oh, there's no question. There's when people are asking us for advice, because it's surprising when you ask people just in general, how are you sleeping? I would say most people say not well, which is really sad when there are lots of things you can do to enhance your sleep environment. So the plants in nature, in and of itself, when you think about, especially during COVID in the winter when you're not as connected, the difference that you feel when you are connected, right? Nature brings calm. Nature makes you feel connected to something bigger than whatever's going on. Fresh air, cool air, all these things that when you're outside really bring your temperature and your anxiety and everything down. So to bring that into a bedroom is incredibly important. Even plants improve your air quality in your home. People don't realize it. It doesn't take much, but the more you have, the more it improves the air quality. So the things that you can do, talk about biophilia, it really can, it can be a game changer.
Yeah.
And it's not that expensive to start to layer those things in to start to see the difference.
Well, and I think biophilia, it sounds kind of like this big buzzy term, but maybe when we strip it all back, it's not
simple.
Quite so complicated. Katherine, I know that you're formally trained. So does the inspiration and like the patterns in nature and biophilia element, does that come from some part of your formal training, or is it something that was like a gut instinct for you?
I would say the outside inspiration is the outside, but also both. I've had a lot of wonderful mentors over the years who have shared their interest in nature with me, but I can definitely pinpoint a lot of moments where my own relationship with nature was reinforced, going back to probably the time when I first was interested in art when I was a young child, and I remember trying to draw this horse, which was kind of a stick figure horse, which had sort of an oval shaped body with these stick legs, and being sort of frustrated and going up to my elementary school art teacher and saying, "Can you help me?" And I remember her words. She said, "No, I can't draw it for you because then it would be my horse instead of yours, but I can give you this book of photos of horses to look at." And she happened to have this gorgeous book of photos of horses galloping. And I remember looking at it, and in particular looking at the horse's hind legs and noticing that they were sort of a backward S-shaped curve, and trying really hard to render that contour, and finally kind of having this revelation when I was able to do it, and realizing at that moment that there are no straight lines in nature. And so that was one moment. My grandfather, who lived in Upper Michigan, was also an artist and an environmentalist who used to do water testing on Lake Michigan, and we used to go for walks together along the beach and look for Tusky Stones, which I bet a lot of people in the Midwest know what those are. They're these rocks that are fossilized bits of coral that are really beautiful when they're wet. You can see the fossil pattern in them. And so there are a lot of moments like these, and I could ramble on and keep telling you more and more about them, but I should probably be cut off, otherwise I'll take
I love it.
The hour.
I think it's fascinating, and I think it, kudos to that teacher for thinking like that. I don't know if you remember her name, but we should give a shout out to her.
I don't remember. I mean, I was probably
Ms. B, whoever you are.
6 or 7 years old or something. So
It's so formative,
Right.
just to have you look at the world in a different way.
right.
I think that's amazing.
Yes.
So I'd love to know what you're working on now and next. Like, is it the Baculite fossil that is still inspiring you right now, or what's going on with you artistically?
Yes, so I'm still inspired by the Baculite fossil. I've been investigating this fossil for 6 years or more. I actually once had a wonderful mentor who told me you could spend your whole life investigating one topic and digging really deep into it. And Morandi actually was the name that he kind of gave as his inspiration for that comment, who just painted different arrangements of bottles for his entire life. So I don't know whether I'll keep, painting Baculite fossils my whole life, but that's what I'm working on still in the studio. And I've been working on making some smaller, more intimate works, because most of my work in this group of paintings up until this time have been really large scale. So I'm experimenting with kind of a smaller, more sort of precious, intimate scale.
So just in closing, I'd love if there's anything that you guys wanted to share in terms of your experience, or anything that you're taking forward to the next gallery walk, or things that you're thinking about as you're talking with clients, or projects that you're working on, Lauren, that maybe you'll see differently because of this experience. Mary Pat, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think, I had this conversation with somebody yesterday when somebody in our industry, we were talking about business, and she was telling me she doesn't sleep. And I said, okay, why? Like, let's talk about that.
Let's unpack that.
Really, seriously, because I said to her, like, forget diet and exercise. If there's one thing that you can do for your health that's actually, I guess I think it's easy because I sleep great, but I have the right environment, right? I said, let's get down to it. So we started talking about a room, and we were talking about darkness and temperature, and are there plants, and like, do you get fresh air? Do you open your windows? And so I think I noticed that I pulled that in
Mm-hmm.
because of this experience. Like, it was just right part of the conversation.
Yeah, I bet.
So I'd have to say, like, our team has now made sure that that's part of when we're asking that question. What does your room look like, and is it serving you? Are these elements in there?
Awesome. Lauren, is there anything going forward from the experience that's going to impact your work?
I think this whole experience has been absolutely wonderful in getting to know everyone and understanding, you know, how important it is actually to have that night's rest, which we learn a lot from the luxury bed collection. So I think just taking that and into all, like I mentioned earlier, all of our different sectors, and concentrating on that multi-sensorial experience that we created here and implementing that in everyday life.
So, Katherine, in closing, how was the experience for you, and how has it maybe changed the way that you look at either doing something with Gallery Walk or in your own personal work?
So, first, I want to thank you guys for working with me. It's been fantastic. I love doing site-specific pieces like this because I love talking to designers who I think are also artists. It's just your canvas is a room instead of a big square. And I love to talk to you because your ideas are so interesting, and I love to find where we have overlap, whether it's graphically or conceptually or philosophically. And I feel like we're really aligned in a lot of those areas, particularly in our thoughts about bringing the outdoors in.
Well, awesome. I just want to thank all of you guys for being so open and having this conversation, and beautiful work. Katherine, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
It really was a pleasure being a part of the team, whether, you know, this or any of the other things relating to Gallery Walk. So awesome job, everybody.